Caleb Stone's horse stopped at the sound of a woman screaming, not the surprised kind, the kind that came from knowing what was next. Dawn light barely touched Redemption Creek's main street. But half the town already stood watching. A man dragged a woman from a house by her hair while 3 small girls screamed from the porch. Thomas Brennan's fist connected with his wife's jaw, and she crumpled into frozen mud. 3 daughters. The crowd shifted but didn't move. Some looked away, most just watched. Caleb's hand found his rifle before his mind caught up. 5 years he'd avoided other people's troubles. 5 years since Mary died, bringing his daughter into a world that wouldn't let her stay. 5 years of silence and distance, and the kind of peace that felt like dying slow. But that sound, that particular scream of a woman who knew help wouldn't come. His boots hit the ground. Brennan. Thomas turned, fist raised for another blow. Blood streaked his knuckles. "This ain't your concern, Stone." Caleb walked forward, rifle loose in his hands. "You're coming with me," he said to the woman. The street went silent. He lifted Sarah Brennan, though he didn't know her name yet, onto his horse. She weighed nothing. Her split lip leaked blood onto his coat sleeve. The 3 girls on the porch stared with identical wide eyes. "Come on," he said quietly. The oldest grabbed her sister's hands and ran. Thomas lunged. Caleb's rifle barrel stopped him cold, pressed against his chest. "Touch them again," Caleb said, voice flat as winter ice, "and law won't matter." He mounted behind the girls, Sarah in front, holding the youngest. The crowd parted like water around stones. As they rode out, Thomas's voice followed. "She's my property." Caleb didn't look back, but his hands shook on the reins, not from fear, from something breaking open inside him that he'd kept sealed for half a decade. The woman whispered through broken teeth, "Why?" He had no answer, not one he could speak aloud. The oldest girl rode in front of Caleb's saddle, small fists gripping the horn like it might save her. Behind them, her mother held the younger 2, silent as stone. 5 miles of open prairie stretched between town and his ranch. Wind cut across brown grass, and the temperature dropped with the failing light. Caleb kept the pace slow for the children. The middle girl finally spoke. "Are you going to hurt Mama too?" Sarah's body went rigid. Caleb stopped the horse. He dismounted and knelt, bringing himself to the child's eye level. 5 years old, maybe. Bruises on her arms shaped like fingerprints. "No, ma'am," he said. "Nobody's going to hurt anybody anymore." The girl studied his face with an intensity that made his chest ache. Finally, she nodded. Sarah watched him with something between hope and disbelief. They rode the rest of the way in silence. And his ranch appeared as the sun touched the horizon, a half-finished cabin, a barn twice its size, and nothing else for miles. Sarah's shoulders sagged when she saw how small it was, how alone, inside. The cabin held 1 room, clean but sparse, a bed, a table, a fireplace cold for months. "You take the cabin," Caleb said, gathering blankets. "I sleep in the barn." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her daughters pressed against her skirts. "What do you want from us?" He couldn't meet her eyes. Nothing, just needed doing. Men don't do nothing for nothing. Maybe they should start. He left before she could question further, crossing to the barn with his blankets and the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on his back. Night fell fast. Through the cabin window, Sarah watched lamplight flicker in the barn. She barricaded the door anyway. Old habits died hard. But for the first time in years, She slept without fear of footsteps approaching in the dark. The sound of children's laughter hit Caleb like a bullet he'd been waiting 5 years to catch. Morning sun slanted through the barn. He'd barely slept, listening for riders from town. But what woke him was something worse than danger. It was joy. The 3 girls played in the yard, chasing chickens. The oldest showed her sisters how to scatter feed. Their laughter rang clear and bright. Mary had laughed like that. Pregnant. Standing in this same yard, talking about the daughter they'd name Rebecca, about the family they'd build. 3 days after the stillbirth, fever took Mary too. He'd buried them on the hillside and hadn't heard laughter since. Sarah emerged from the cabin. She looked small in daylight, bruises vivid against pale skin. She saw him watching and ducked her head. "Thank you for—" The youngest girl's cry cut her off. Caleb was moving before Sarah could react. The 2-year-old burned with fever, her small body shaking. Yesterday's cold ride, the trauma, the fear, it had all caught up. "She needs medicine," Sarah said, voice cracking. "But the town, I'll go." "No," Sarah grabbed his arm. "They'll kill you, or worse. They'll follow you back. I'd rather lose a daughter than be responsible for your death." The words hung between them. Rather lose a daughter. He knew that particular choice, knew how it haunted you. "I already lost a daughter," Caleb said quietly. "Not losing another." He saddled his horse while Sarah begged him to stay, but he was already gone, riding toward the town that wanted him dead. The general store owner tried to refuse service. Caleb paid triple price for medicine, food, fabric. The man's wife, a soft woman with sad eyes, leaned close as she wrapped the parcels. "Thomas is rallying men. They'll come for her. Let them come." He rode back fast, administered the medicine while Sarah held her daughter and wept. That night, fever broke. The child slept peaceful for the first time. Caleb sat by the fireplace, staring at a small carved wooden horse on the mantel. His hands had made it for a daughter who never breathed. Sarah found him there. She didn't speak, just sat beside him in the quiet. "Rebecca," he said, the first time he'd spoken the name aloud in 5 years. "My daughter." Sarah's hand hovered near his, didn't touch, but the comfort was offered. They'd crossed some line, bound now by shared grief and chosen risk. Outside, wolves howled. Winter wasn't finished with them yet. Habit, Caleb had learned, was the enemy of grief. Routine was its cure. Days found their rhythm. Sarah cooked and organized the chaos of bachelor life. Caleb taught the oldest girl, Emma, to ride. The middle one, Rose, gathered eggs without fear. The youngest, May, toddled after him, calling him KK. The walls between them eroded through normalcy, but the outside world noticed. The preacher arrived on Sunday, Bible in hand and judgment in his eyes. "You're harboring another man's wife, stone, breaking covenant." She was dying, still breaking covenant? The law says, the law stood and watched her beaten in the street. The preacher left without blessing the house. At the general store, prices doubled. Neighbors who once waved now turned away. The town was choosing sides, and he stood alone. One evening, Emma approached while he mended fence. "Can we stay forever?" The question caught him sideways. He looked toward the cabin where Sarah hung laundry. She watched them, and he knew the question was really hers. "I don't know, honey." "I hope so," Emma said. "You got kind eyes." "Not like Papa." That night, working by lamplight, Sarah's hand brushed his passing leather tools. Both pulled away, but the charge remained. "Why'd you never remarry?" she asked. Figured I'd used up my chance at family." Sarah was quiet a long moment. "Maybe you get more than one." Before he could answer, hoofbeats approached. 3 riders stopped at the property line, Thomas and 2 men from town. They didn't cross onto his land, but they made their presence known. Caleb stood on his porch, rifle visible. The men left. "What happens?" Sarah asked softly. "When they stop, just looking." "We'll find out." But his jaw was set, and she recognized the look. A man preparing for war. The storm that trapped them together was the gentlest thing to happen in either of their lives. Late March, blizzard hit hard. 3 days of wind and snow. The world disappeared behind white walls. Inside the cabin, proximity forced intimacy they'd carefully avoided. First day, they maintained careful distance. Second day, the girls adapted, playing games while adults circled each other like wary animals. Third day, the girls slept and they finally talked. "Thomas wanted sons," Sarah said, staring at the fire. "For the farm he inherited, first daughter was disappointment, second was rage, third was when he broke completely." Her voice stayed level, but her hands shook. "He said I was cursed. Maybe I am." "You're not cursed. 3 daughters and not 1 son. What kind of woman? The kind who kept them alive." Caleb leaned forward. "The kind who stood between him and them even when you knew what was coming. That's not cursed. That's courage." Sarah's eyes filled. "Why did you save us?" Now it was his turn. The story came rough. Words he'd never spoken aloud. Mary dying. The doctor making him choose, save the wife or the baby. Him freezing, the doctor choosing, both dying anyway. "I brought her to this hard land," he said. "Killed her with my dream of a ranch." "No." Sarah's voice was fierce. "The land didn't kill her. Childbirth did. And you didn't choose. You were forced to choose, which isn't choosing at all." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Wind howled. "When this is over," Sarah said, "if we survive it, what happens to us?" "I don't know how to want something without losing it." She shifted closer. "Maybe you already want it. Maybe you're just scared to admit it." Their hands finally touched. Outside, the storm broke. Dawn came pristine. World covered in fresh snow. Sarah stood in the doorway, breathing free air. Caleb joined her. "You gave me a reason to be human again. Maybe we saved each other." That night, they heard wolves closer than before, drawn by the storm, hungry. Caleb reinforced the barn where livestock sheltered. Sarah watched from the cabin window. Real wolves were coming. And they wouldn't be the 4-legged kind. They came in the brightness of noon. 6 men on horseback, carrying paper that made their cruelty legal. Thomas led them. Sheriff Dax rode beside him. Dutch Kerner, Caleb's former friend, brought up the rear, eyes fixed on the ground. Caleb stood on his porch, Sarah beside him. They'd hidden the girls in the root cellar as planned. "Stone." Sheriff Dax held up papers. "Got a court order. Sarah Brennan is Thomas's legal wife. Children are his property. You're interfering with marriage contract. Hand them over or face arrest." "Law also says a man can't beat his wife near to death," Caleb said. "Where were you then?" "Domestic matter." "So's this." Thomas urged his horse forward. "Give me what's mine." Sarah stepped forward. Caleb tried to stop her, but she shook him off. For weeks she'd hidden. Now she stood visible, defiant. "I'm not a thing to be owned," she said. Thomas laughed. "Law says different." He dismounted, grabbed her arm. Old habit. Sarah flinched but didn't fight. Then May's voice came from the root cellar, frightened. "Mama?" Emma burst out, running to her mother. Thomas backhanded the 8-year-old child. Emma fell. Everything stopped. Caleb's rifle came up, cocked. Thomas froze. Sheriff reached for his gun, but Sarah stepped between them all. "Enough. I'll go. Just don't kill each other over me." Emma stood, blood streaming from her nose. "Mama, no. Mr. Caleb promised nobody hurts us anymore. He promised." Dutch finally looked up. "When they came for her, you looked away." Stone. "But the law, when the law comes for you," Caleb said, voice like broken glass. "Who'll look away then?" Sheriff Dax shifted his weight. "Tomorrow. Stone. I'm bringing the territorial marshal. You hand her over peaceful, or we drag you both to jail." They rode off. Thomas's laughter followed them. Sarah collapsed on the porch. Caleb held her while she wept. Emma clutched the wooden horse, cracked now from falling. Rose asked, "Are we going back to Papa?" May just cried. Caleb looked at his empty land and knew tomorrow everything ended, one way or another. Night was when the wolves inside howled louder than the ones outside. Midnight found Sarah in the barn doorway. "We run, tonight. Take the girls. Head west to California. Disappear." "No. You'll let pride get you killed. Get us all taken?" Caleb stood, faced her. "Not pride, principle. Some things you stand for. And I'm supposed to watch you die for principle? Would you rather teach your daughters that cruelty wins if it's loud enough?" The argument hit hard. Two people terrified in different directions. Sarah's fear against Caleb's conviction. She accused him of playing hero with their lives. He asked if running was really living. They separated to different parts of the ranch, both raw, alone in the barn. Caleb stared at his hands. "What if I fail them like before? What if tomorrow I lose everyone again?" In the cabin, Sarah watched her daughters sleep. "What if fighting costs him everything? How do I live with that?" Dawn came slow. The girls woke, found their mother crying. They gathered around her, small arms, fierce hearts. Then Emma took her sister's hands and walked to the barn. They found Caleb sitting in the straw, head in his hands. May climbed into his lap without asking. Rose presented a drawing she'd made at night, all 5 of them holding hands, with family printed in crooked letters. Emma said, "Mama's scared, but we're not when you're here. If we run," she continued, "we're always running. You taught me that. You said sometimes you stand your ground." Sarah appeared in the doorway, saw Caleb holding her daughters, his family now, chosen and claimed. She knelt beside them. "I was wrong. We fight." Together, Caleb made a decision, sent his fastest horse with a message to Judge Harlan. 2 counties over, the judge owed him a life debt from years back. Long shot, but a chance. They spent the morning preparing, fortifying doors, stocking supplies, creating hiding places. As the sun climbed, dust rose on the horizon. The marshal was coming, but maybe, just maybe, so was the judge. They came at noon, when shadows were shortest and truth had nowhere to hide. 12 riders this time. Thomas, Sheriff Dax, Territorial Marshal Crane, 9 townsmen forming a mob, legal and extra-legal force combined. The girls hid in the root cellar. Caleb and Sarah stood on the porch together, visible, defiant. Marshal Crane was a hard man with harder eyes. "You're ordered to surrender, Sarah Brennan. Refuse, and you're arrested for kidnapping and interference with marriage contract." Caleb started to speak, but Sarah stepped forward. Her voice shook but grew stronger with each word. "You call it law. I call it permission. Permission for men to break women and call it marriage." She pointed at Thomas. He beat me for giving him daughters instead of sons. Beat me in the street while you all watched. Where was the law then? Some men shifted uncomfortably. Others hardened. Thomas screamed she was lying. Marshall raised his hand to enforce the order, and stopped. Another dust cloud approached, fast. Judge Harlan arrived with 2 federal deputies. Horse lathered from hard riding, he dismounted, papers in hand. Marshal Crane, I've reviewed this case. His voice carried like thunder. Territorial law allows marriage contract nullification for sustained cruelty and documented abandonment. I'm charging Thomas Brennan with aggravated assault. The legal ground shifted. The mob's confidence cracked. Furthermore, Judge Harlan continued, any man who raises hand against a woman or child in my jurisdiction will answer to federal law, not just territorial custom. Thomas, humiliated and facing jail, made a desperate lunge at Sarah. Caleb intercepted. They went down fighting, brutal and close. Caleb's fist connected once, twice. Thomas fell, defenseless. Caleb could have killed him. Everyone saw it, his fist raised for the final blow. He stopped. No, Caleb said, breathing hard. You don't get to make me like you. Marshall arrested Thomas. Mob dispersed like smoke. Dutch approached, hat in hands. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Caleb nodded. Didn't forgive yet, but acknowledged. As men rode away, Emma, Rose, and May emerged from hiding. May ran to Caleb. Did we win? He lifted her. This child who'd claimed him. Yeah, little one. We won. Sarah met his eyes across the yard. Relief, gratitude, love blazing unspoken. Judge Harlan stayed to finalize papers. You're free, Mrs. Brennan, legally, completely. What now, she asked. Caleb answered, now we live. Spring came late to Montana, but when it arrived, it came in a rush of green that made you forget winter ever existed. 6 weeks after the confrontation, the world transformed. Legal proceedings concluded, Thomas imprisoned. Sarah granted dissolution. The community slowly shifted, some ashamed, some still bitter. Most just moved on, but Caleb and Sarah didn't need approval anymore. The cabin was finished. 2 bedrooms added, furniture built, curtains sewn. Sarah's garden flourished, vegetables and flowers both, signs of permanence everywhere. Emma learned to read. Curled up with her mother by lamplight, Rose helped Caleb in the barn. Fearless now, around horses. May called him Papa, and he'd stopped correcting her weeks ago. One evening, Caleb cleared his throat awkwardly. When you're ready, would you consider marrying, for real, by choice? Sarah smiled. Ask me proper. He did, awkward and earnest, hat in his hands like a boy. She said yes. The next day, Caleb took Sarah to the hillside where 2 wooden crosses marked his past. First visit in 5 years. This is Sarah, he said to the graves. These are Emma, Rose, and May. They're my family now. He placed wildflowers. I hope, you'd approve. Sarah took his hand. No guilt, only gratitude for what was and acceptance of what is. They walked back down the hill together. That afternoon, they planted an apple tree in front of the cabin, all 5 of them working, digging, planting, watering. The girls helped by playing in the dirt, laughing. Emma asked, will we really get to eat apples from our tree, Papa? First time she'd called him that. The word hit him like a blessing. You will, Caleb said. We're not going anywhere. This is home. Sarah leaned against him, watching their daughters play. I used to think God punished me with daughters. Now I know he saved me with them. He saved us all. The sun lowered, painting everything gold. The finished cabin stood solid, smoke rising from the chimney. The apple tree's small branches reached toward sky. Chickens scratched in the yard, horses grazed in the pasture. On the mantel inside, the carved wooden horse sat glued back together, imperfect but whole, like all of them. Home, they discovered, wasn't a place you found. It was what you built from broken pieces and brave hearts, and spring, finally, completely, had come. The end.